Bhimrao Ramji Ambedkar, also known as Baba Saheb Ambedkar, was one of the most prominent lawyers, economists, politicians, and social reformers who inspired the Dalit Buddhist movement and campaigned against social discrimination against the untouchables. He played a significant role in the upliftment of the downtrodden. He was considered a messiah for the suppressed classes. He is considered a great critic of the caste system. Born a Dalit, formerly classified as untouchable and placed at the lowest rung of the Hindu caste stratification, Dr. Bhimrao Ramji Ambedkar suffered discrimination throughout his life. The civil rights leader, often recognized as the architect of the Indian Constitution, in his most scholarly yet neglected political writing, Annihilation of Caste, denounced Hinduism and its caste system. Annihilation of Caste was originally not intended to be written as a book by Dr. Ambedkar. It is in fact an undelivered speech by the great man. The speech was to be delivered at an anti-caste convention held in Lahore by Hindu reformers. In a letter dated 12 December 1935, the secretary of the Jat Pat Todak Mandal, that is the Society for the Breakup of Caste System, an anti-caste Hindu reformist organization based in Lahore, invited Dr. B.R. Ambedkar to deliver a speech on the caste system in India at their annual conference in 1936. Dr. Ambedkar wrote the speech as an essay titled Annihilation of Caste and sent in advance to the organizers in Lahore for printing and distribution. The organizers found some of the content to be objectionable towards the Orthodox Hindu religion, and they sought the deletion of large sections of the more controversial content endangering Brahminical interests. They wrote to Dr. Ambedkar seeking the removal of sections which they found, in their words, unbearable. Dr. Ambedkar declared in response that he would not change at least a comma of his text. After much deliberation, the committee of organizers decided to cancel their annual conference in its entirety because they feared violence by Orthodox Hindus at the venue if they held the event after. Dr. Ambedkar, in order to share his ideas on caste system, published 1500 copies of the speech as a book on 15th May 1936 at his own expense, as Jat Pat Todak Mandal failed to fulfill their word. Annihilation of Caste is an account of the belief that social reform has to take precedence over political and religious reform, providing instances of the tyranny practiced by upper caste Hindus on the untouchable community of India. Talking about social reform, Ambedkar highlights the need to reconstruct the Hindu society, break the caste system, and urges Hindus to admit that one caste is not fit to rule another caste. In this speech, Dr. Ambedkar felt that caste is a system in which the determination of the position, rights, and duties of an individual is done based on the birth of such individual in a particular group. In the essay, Dr. Ambedkar criticized the Hindu religion, its caste system, and its religious texts, which are male-dominant, spreading hatred and suppression of female interests. He argued that intercaste dining and intercaste marriage are not sufficient to annihilate the caste system, but that the real method of breaking up the caste system was to destroy the religious notions upon which caste is founded. He further opined that another idea for the abolition of caste is to begin with intercaste dinners. He said that it is an inadequate remedy. There are many castes which allow interdining, but it is a common experience that interdining has not succeeded in killing the spirit of caste and the consciousness of caste. He thought that the real remedy was intermarriage. Fusion of blood can alone create the feeling of being kith and kin, and unless this feeling of kinship, of being kindred, becomes paramount, the separatist feeling created by caste will not vanish. Among the Hindus, intermarriage must necessarily be a factor of great force in social life than it need be in the life of the non-Hindus. Where society is already well knit by other ties, marriage is an ordinary incident of life. The real remedy for breaking caste is intermarriage. Nothing else will serve as the solvent of caste. Speaking about freedom, he says the division of labor is not a division based on choice, and by not permitting the readjustment of occupations, caste becomes a monster causing unemployment. The talk of equality stands as a fiction in Hindu society where there is no morality and rationality, and excommunication is the punishment for dissent. The book argues that Hindus do not possess consciousness of kind, rather, they only possess consciousness of caste, and hence the history of Hinduism has been the history of defeat and darkness. Calling Chaturvarna absurd, Ambedkar says that the Varna system, which has been made to safeguard people, curbs the paramount requirements of self-preservation by denying a Shudra physical, political, and moral rights. The Hindus who defend the caste system, saying it exists in all religions, need to know that in Hinduism, each caste has a religious sanction rather than just a social construct. Ambedkar offers two solutions to abolish the caste system. 1. Intercaste marriages. 2. Destruction of religious scriptures. Ambedkar tried to endow the lower caste with a glorious history of sons of the soil to help them acquire an alternative, not caste-based identity, regain their self-respect and overcome their divisions. Untouchability is the indication of slavery in the entire Hindu society. If the untouchables find themselves chained by the caste Hindus themselves live under the slavery of religious scriptures. Therefore, the emancipation of the untouchables automatically involved the emancipation of the Hindu society as a whole. Ambedkar warns that nothing worthwhile can be created based on caste. He said that a nation or morality cannot be built on this basis. The untouchables had completely surrendered self-respect under the influence of tradition to the domination of the upper caste. They had lost all spirit to fight and assert themselves. The myth of inherent pollution also considerably influenced the minds of untouchables. Therefore, it was necessary to arouse their self-respect. Untouchables should realize that they are the equals of caste Hindus. They must throw away their bondage. Ambedkar believed that education would greatly contribute to the improvement of the untouchables. He always exhorted his followers to reach excellence in the field of knowledge. Knowledge is a liberating force. Education makes a man enlightened, makes him aware of this self-respect, and also helps him to lead a better life materially. One of the causes of the degradation of the untouchables was that they were denied the right to education. Ambedkar criticized the British policy on education for not adequately encouraging education among the lower castes. Another very important remedy which Ambedkar upheld was that the untouchables should free themselves of the village community and its economic bondage. In the traditional setup, the untouchables were bound to specific occupations. They were dependent upon the caste Hindus for their sustenance. They had to submit themselves to the domination of caste Hindus even for meager returns. Ambedkar was aware of the economic dimension of their servitude. Therefore, he always insisted that the untouchables should stop doing their traditional work. Instead, they should acquire new skills and start new professions. Education would enable them to get employment. There was no point in remaining dependent upon the village economy. With growing industrialization, there were greater opportunities in the cities. Ambedkar made efforts to reform the philosophical basis of Hinduism. However, he was convinced that Hinduism would not modify its disposition towards the untouchables. So he searched for an alternative to Hinduism. After careful consideration, he adopted Buddhism and asked his followers to do the same. His conversion to Buddhism meant the reassertion of his faith in a religion based on humanism. Ambedkar argued that Buddhism was the least obscurantist religion. As a step in this direction, Ambedkar attaches much importance to the political participation of the oppressed classes. He repeatedly emphasized that in the context of colonialism, it had become imperative that the untouchables gain political rights by organizing themselves politically. He claimed that by attaining political power, untouchables would be able to protect safeguards and a sizable share of power so that they could force certain policies on the legislature. In Ambedkar's interpretation, any form of marginalization is embedded in institutional structure. He tried to rebuild Indian society by eliminating discriminative social structures. He highlights the structural and institutional actions that delimit the lives of the Dalits. Ambedkar's concept of social justice is a good example of his idea of total inclusion for the marginalized people. According to him, social justice stands for the liberty, equality, and fraternity of all human beings. His idea of social justice was progressive because it encouraged rationalist and humanist feelings. He did not support any type of hypocrisy, injustice, and exploitation. He wanted to establish a system based on the right relations between man and man in all dimensions of his life. He believed in a social system in which man's status is based on his merit and achievements, and where no one is noble or untouchable because of his or her birth. Dr. Ambedkar has tried all kinds of strategies during his life to eradicate caste and more especially to emancipate the Dalits from this oppressive social system. In the political domain, he promoted separate electorate, party building, and public policies like reservations, and did not hesitate to collaborate with the ruler of the time, be it the British or the Congress, to have things done. In the social domain, he argued in favor of reforms at the grassroots level, education being his first goal, and reforms by the state as evident from the Hindu Code Bill. More than 60 years later, his contribution to the making of modern India is possibly more substantial than that of any other leader of his generation. He has not only prepared the ground for a silent revolution, but has also played a key role in the drafting of the Constitution of India, which has set the terms for the development of the world's largest democracy. I hope that in this video I am able to summarize Dr. Ambedkar's Annihilation of Caste and also his ideas on freedom, education, and liberty. Thanks for watching.